Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the next episode of CaOverwatch.
The Toronto Defiant will not be denied.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen.
And welcome to another episode of CaOverwatch. Man, has there been a ton of stuff that have happened in the last week. I'm super excited. Are you as excited as I am?
Yeah, it's a great time to be a Defiant fan. Again, we could talk about some of the pros and cons. I think it's a home run, but I think there's some, things to speak about in terms of the big signing that we were talking about today. However, I think if you're a Defiant fan, you absolutely have to be happy, waking up this morning and sort of seeing the news.
Yeah, you absolutely do. And, just before we get started, guys, if you like what you hear, make sure to smash that like button, smash that subscribe button. It just helps us get out to all those other Toronto Defiant fans that, may be lost in the wind right now, not knowing exactly how to process these new signings and what to do. So if you guys like that, please give us a like. But if not, then tell us why.
Yeah.
So without further, Spencer.
I was just saying, without further ado, let's just jump right into it because before we get into the big signing, which obviously is Sado, we're going to sort of talk about the two previous ones. I know we've spoken about Aztec recently, but I was just going to quickly read to you guys AVRL. I don't know if that's how I'm pronouncing that correctly, but AVRL from Korean Contenders. I actually reached out to him specifically. He is one of the casters because I want to get better insight on these two most recent signings that Toronto Defiant picked up because obviously Chris and I are, we're Defiant fans of Defiant podcast. I don't necessarily go back and watch every single Korean Contenders matchup. So when we're talking about a guy like Aztec, here is what he had to say. And he said, hey, sure thing. Aztec is a very straightforward signing. This guy was number one on my list for flex supports in Korea, was 100% going to be signed. Very similar to Myungbong from last year in terms of hype and level of skill. Obviously, Aztec was on Uprising Academy, but I don't think the Uprising were looking to promote him internally for this one because Aztec has a high trade value and would probably end up being benched if both him and Myungbong were on the same team. Overall, Aztec is a super solid pickup and one of the most sought after Overwatch League rookies from Korean Contenders. Signature pick is Ana, like Myungbong, has a ridiculous fast coalescence charge rate on Moira as well. Now, I have to say that I did go back and watch the Korean Contenders finals and semifinals when WGS played versus Element Mystic, obviously to see what Ansoonjae also brought to the table, but also their game versus the Runaway. And I can say that everything he's saying is true. I was really, really impressed by his Moira, which is usually pretty interesting thing to say. Everybody's sort of just how can you stand on a Moira? But he was building his coalescence incredibly quickly. But not only that, he was actually able to manage dealing both damage, getting final blows, and healing all at the same time. And his Ana was really, really impressive as well. While his Zen didn't stand out as much, especially in the Element Mystic game, I think him and MCD were kind of going head to head. I think that this is a really, really good prospect. I know we've spoken about him before, but I'm just reiterating how excited I am for a player like this.
Yeah, exactly. And it's super exciting for him. And I'm hoping that, with him and Ansoonjae being, up fairly green in the Overwatch League support line, that they do get enough support from the KDG and the rest of the coaching staff to be able to really kind of grow and become better and grow into their roles. Now,
exactly.
AVRL also had, some comments to say on Ansoonjae, and I'll read them out to you right now as well. So to be candid, I don't really have Ansoonjae on my list. He's one of the few players on the new Element Mystic that was even eligible. There's a few main supports I would have had ahead, but some are underage. He's a good Lucio and Brig, and I think with this one, it's going to be more about trusting the process. I'm sure he was well scouted and tested by Defiant. Clearly, Element Mystic have a very good reputation for scouting and have produced some of the best players in the league. Element Mystic can repeatedly export their rosters and then rebuild almost entirely new powerhouse rosters year after year. So I do have a lot of trust in Element Mystic's scouting system to start with, especially given how well they played this year overall, for having a mostly rookie / underrated roster. So here's how I see this, and kind of divulging what he said. He said maybe not necessarily, Ansoonjae was a completely standout player among some other, big names, big brands in the Korean Contenders League. But, he was scouted well. What does this mean to me? This means that, maybe he showed some of those characteristics of a good green player, somebody who's coachable, somebody who has a good attitude, somebody who knows how to change, how to grow. So that's what I'm guessing, he brought to the table when he went through his skying process, when he went through his trial process with the Toronto Defiant.
Yeah, and it's important to note that even though Element Mystic did fall short at Korean Contenders playoffs, they finished, third, fourth. They went up against WGS, World Gaming Star Phoenix in the semifinals, who ended up winning the entire thing and brought them to a map 5, right? They lost 3-2, but a map 5, 1-1 on control, 100% to 99. That was an incredibly close game, right? And this was, again, Element Mystic didn't necessarily perform significantly impressively over the course of Korean Contenders, but when they brought in that sort of new roster to surround MCD with, Ansoonjae was one of them. Again, I'm apologizing for pronouncing that name wrong. But with that new 5, they were really able to put it together. So I think there's a ton of potential. And my final sort of point is a little bit of a two-parter, but you're right, Chris. We know that Defiant were running trials in Korea, right? We know that they were running trials in NA, EU, and also Korea. So this screams to me that I'm sure he performed very well. And I know a lot of people were a little bit disappointed because they wanted somebody like Faith, who maybe has a little bit bigger of a brand. Obviously, some people will suggest that he has a better Lucio. And I don't disagree with those points. Obviously, I don't know the Korean scene well enough. But I will say this. In their final matchup versus WGS, Ansoonjae played the Lucio, and Faith played the Lucio as well. But it was important to note that when WGS actually played Mercy, Faith was swapped out, and they brought in a different main support to play Mercy, whereas Ansoonjae played the Mercy, the Lucio, and the Brig. So this could also be a flexibility thing, where you think, okay, yes, maybe Faith does have the better Lucio, but on other heroes, Ansoonjae is a more flexible main support. Again, adaptability is all really important, especially since a lot of the rumors are that Overwatch is going to start on Overwatch 2, and hero pools might also come back. So if you're in a new game, and you're in a new title, and you're in hero pools, you might want a main support who can play multiple different heroes. So I'm actually pretty excited about this.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree. It's something that gives me good hope and fits into that 2-year plan that Adam keeps on referring back to. Now, we got to get to the main one. The real exciting signing. That's Sado. That's the boy, our golden boy, I guess. Apart from maybe Logic's coming in, and maybe whoever they pick up in the other DPS role. But Spencer, initial thoughts, what are they?
It's got to be a home run, really, right? Is he Meg? I mean, maybe not. If you went in the offseason, who was the number one main tank to pick up? It probably was Meg, maybe. But Sado had an incredible year, an absolute bounce back performance. I know he was disappointing in season 2. But that was also a GOATS meta. It was really different. You had people like Sideshow, whose obvious analysis I really respect, consistently be like, hey, he's actually not that bad. He just had a bad GOATS, right? This team is going to perform better. He's going to perform better. They obviously kept him on for a reason. And then he comes out in season 3, and he's one of the best main tanks in the league. You could argue he was the best Reinhardt in the league. Probably not. You probably put Super still above him. Some other really good names for shout. But again, we posted on our Twitter. He had the 3rd most damage on Reinhardt per 10 minutes, just behind Super and Gig, I believe, or Dreamer, I forget. But he had the least amount of damage taken. So this is clearly a very, very high ceiling main support. He's super aggressive, obviously. There's still some risk. I think it's important for people to know that, yes, he did really improve, but also, look at the support line. It went from Boombox and Neptuno to Alarm and Funny Astro. That can make a main tank look better. So I don't want to sit here and say he's 100% going to be a top 3 main tank next year. I think it's possible. I do think there's another realm where maybe we actually do rely on Beast a little bit more than we initially thought, or maybe Sado doesn't look as dominant as we initially thought. So I just want to put that out there just for people to temper their expectations a little bit. But with that being said, I think he was the best free agent available on main tank. Again, you could argue Meg, probably Meg, but other than that, this is a home run, and I think him and Beast are going to fit really well together, and if it is a double main tank meta, you have that covered as well.
Yeah, and Spencer, just another kind of question for you then. Obviously we know that we think that Beast kind of needs a leader, needs somebody to go behind and really help grow with. Do you think Sado's that person?
Yeah, and I don't know his leadership capabilities. I'd probably talk to some people who knew him behind the scenes. If we ever speak to KDG, I can ask him something like that. I just think when you look at the stats on especially Reinhardt and stuff like that, Beast and Sado play a very similar style of game. They're very aggressive, they're very aggro, and they like to output a ton of damage. Sado just does a much better job at avoiding being picked. Right? He does a much better job at avoiding taking a bunch of damage as well as dishing it out. So I think if you're somebody like Beast, you can look to Sado, you can try to mimic that play style. I think it is a really good thing. And if it is a double main take meta, again, we know Beast is really, really mechanically gifted, lacked a little bit of like the leadership and the decisiveness. So playing alongside somebody like Sado, who can, again, bring that to the table, is going to look really good. And again, guys, it's Overwatch 2 probably. Whoa. We just lost Chris. It's Overwatch 2 probably. Oh, you're back. Okay, we might cut that out. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Technical difficulties, it happens. But it might be Overwatch 2, so who knows which new heroes are going to be added. And if they are added, it might be another main tank hero. It might be, hey, there's another main tank that plays really well alongside Ryan. Having 2 main tanks could be really important.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree with that. And it sounds like he can be definitely somebody that leads us to a top 10, hopefully top 5 position. That all depends, once again, on our more unknown people that we're having on, like our Aztec and Ansoonjae. But there's some, speculation out there. I think we got to give credit where credit due. There's somebody named OW Gasser who keeps on having some really good leaks, I guess, on Reddit. So he leaked a couple of people. He thinks, I think Michelle is going to be joining Toronto Defiant, and he thinks that did he say
Heesu, yeah. So listen,
yeah.
I don't want to leak anything either. I'm just gonna say that I'm pretty confident this guy's right. So for now, because I don't want to put up a video and then it be, useless because we don't speak with these settings, that might happen again Monday for all we know. Let's talk about the potential that Michelle and Heesu are going to join the Toronto Defiant. Let's start positive first, and that's Heesu. This is another home run hit, right? I think your big marquee free agent is probably Sado. I think we talked about too, that was probably the more likely one to happen. I think he's a top 3 at his position. I think Heesu has a ton of potential. I mean, Heesu, you know what? He might have struggled at points, I guess, randomly. Maybe he wasn't the Widowmaker some people wanted him out to be, but you don't need him to be on this team because you have Logics to play Widow, you have Logics to play Tracer, you needed another hit scan DPS and to play the McCree. You needed another hit scan DPS who can do a couple of things, and that's either round out his hero pool, i.e. Sombra, in which Heesu is arguably the best in the entire league. His Sombra is elite. And, if it is a double hit scan meta, can he play the Ashe? Can he play the Widowmaker? We already know he can. I think he fills out Logix perfectly. Like, this is like a perfect fit. You could argue it's even a better fit than Carpe and Heesu because, again, Logix has a better tracer, I think, than Carpe does. Like,
here's a real question then. What do you think about communication? Like, I mean, Logix is kind of going to be... if he's the only one starting, he's going to be the only kind of real Western English-speaking individual.
Logix has some history playing on mixed rosters, and even though I think we do know that, like, ideally some of these people at the very least can, like, comm slightly in English, right? Like, I know they're not, like, fluent, but at the very, like, they can understand comms, right? Like, stuff like that is something you can also learn. But also, if Logix is playing Widowmaker, it's not like he has to be this massive shot caller, right? He's not really going to be developing a ton of strategies. Like, I think when Logix is going to be in, it's going to be, hey, you're McCree, take good positions and like click heads, right? Like, I think if you're going to have a position, maybe like one Western player and 5 other Koreans alongside of you, hit scan is probably the one area that you want that Western player to be. So it's not, maybe perfect. And Tracer might struggle a little bit because Tracer usually want to coordinate those dives, but man, Logix is so talented, and I think the team will figure it out.
Okay, yeah, I totally understand that. Now, on the less positive one, Michelle.
I don't want to say less positive. Just I think Sado and Heesu are home runs, and Michelle maybe not. Yeah, maybe not a home run.
Why do you think that, Spencer?
It's tough to really get a gauge for a guy like Michelle. Obviously, man, Seoul Dynasty were so up and down this entire year. They had absolutely zero consistency. Obviously, it's not comforting when your off tank was benched for essentially a main tank last year. And it's one thing if he was just benched for the Sigma and then kind of came in and really popped off on D.Va, but that wasn't the case. We actually saw Marvel play D.Va over Michelle multiple different times throughout the year. And even when Michelle did come into play, actually the team looked worse with him on D.Va as opposed to Marvel. So that might have been a comms thing, that might have been a coaching thing, but at the end of the day, that doesn't necessarily instill confidence when you're like hoping to build this sort of like 6-7-5-ish dark horse team that you want to build around, to have a player who was just most recently benched by a main tank in the off tank role. Now, there are positives, obviously, right? It could have been a coaching situation, it could have been a comm structure, it could have been a style, it could have been a fit. Right, he's playing alongside Marvel and Gesture. What would he be like playing alongside somebody like Sado with KDG as your coach, like he was in season 2 when he looked really, really good? as opposed to the coaching staff after KDG left and he didn't look nearly as good, right? He was still highly touted when he came into the league. He was highly touted after season 2. I do think some of his value came from his ability to switch over to Sombra, which is no longer nearly as useful. But I will say that obviously in KDG we trust. He has history with this player, so if he brought him up, there's probably a reason. He is very flexible, which we know. And again, if you look at Overwatch 2, you might want an off-tank who can play multiple different off-tanks. It's not necessarily going to be D.Va forehead, right? His Sigma was good. His D.Va was good. His Hog looked good. He can play Zarya much better than some other options, like maybe like a Mecha or a Janu. And maybe you just want an off-tank, who knows, who can really play, this new off-tank that nobody's heard of yet. So,
yeah.
And hero pools could be a thing.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, and I also noticed, when we did some research on Overwatch Stats Lab, his Sigma wasn't too bad.
It's really good.
His D.Va was a little bit lacking, but his Sigma wasn't too bad given his playtime that he had.
Yeah.
This may be another thing where maybe KDG made the pick within his means, within his budgetary constraints that he had. Maybe he spent a lot more of that money on Aztec, Ansoonjae,
Heesu, Sado,
or
our Flex support, or Flex DPS player, which we're going to get to shortly, but you're right.
Yeah, or Flex DPS player, and then, this is just something that he's like, okay, well, now I have these things that I want to pick up, and I have to work with this type of budget, and this is the best kind of pick we have for the budget. And I think that plays a part.
Yeah.
It plays a part in the role because, COVID, everybody's budget's kind of going down. So I think that plays a part. So I guess we'll just hope to see that, KDG can do to, Michelle, what he wants to do with Aztec and Ansoonjae, and that's, help them improve.
Exactly. And it's also worth noting that, listen, were there better options? Probably, right? Gabe Lassou, number 1, and Fury, number 2. Do I think Gabe Lassou would have fit this team perfectly? Absolutely. And I think some people are disappointed that we didn't go out there and get one of those 2 players. Listen, guys, we're not budget by any means, but we're also not the number 1 budget in the entire league. From what we've heard and from what the rumors are, especially Gabe Lassou, right? The bidding war is absolutely insane. So I don't think Defiant sat down and said, I could sign Gabe Lassou, but I would much prefer Michelle. At some point, if you take away Gabe Lassou and you take away Fury, I think you could legitimately make an argument that Michelle was the best available off-tank after that, right? Janu, maybe on D.Va, but I still think Michelle has more flexibility, a higher upside. He's only 20, and again, he has history with KDG. Meko is actually probably the one I would have rather seen. I still think I would have rather seen a guy like Meko. But you can, again, still argue flexibility. And again, longevity, who knows, right? Meko's got a really, really good D.Va. His Sigma was underwhelming. No, I should say underwhelming. That was a little bit of a weird roster last year. But still, KG has history with him, and I think flexibility is going to really be really important, especially with potential hero pools and potential Overwatch 2 on the horizon. So, hey.
Okay, so I think that's good chatting about that. Next up, and I think final topic is Flex DPS.
Yeah. So I mean, if the leaked roster is true, our roster seems to be Sado, Beast, Michelle, Logic's Heesu, Aztec, and Ansoonjae. Very clear hole in that roster is, what if it's a Genji meta? What if it's a Doomfist meta? Logic's is a great hit scan. He's not very good at Pharah. So, and I think Heesu's flexible, but I don't want to see him on the Pharah. So there's a very clear hole here in this roster. So I think it's worth noting, and it's the only one that we haven't heard, a guess about per se. And again, I don't leak anything, and I'm not going to leak anything, but if you look at Flex DPS players available in the market, if I had to speculate, I would think Rascal, Libero, and Valentine. And maybe NA First from, Fusion University, currently T1. I'm just a little bit less high on him as some other people. I've talked to some people behind the scenes, and they're a little bit less high on him. Personally, I'd like to see us go for somebody like Rascal, Libero, Valentine. And some of these names seem like pretty big long shots, but I don't think they're super, super long shots. Again, nothing's confirmed and nothing's signed and nothing's written down, but I think that there's a chance that we get one of these 3 people. So Chris, of those 3, who do you want? Who do you want to go for?
I mean, for me right now, I like the idea of Libero. I feel like Valentine would be the individual who may be most economical.
Maybe. Yeah, I don't know.
I out of the 3, I feel like he's the one with not to say it's a small brand, but the smallest brand out of the 3, and I think that he'd be a little more economical. And I think with the addition of Sado and Logix, who I don't think was cheap, and maybe Heesu, I think that Valentine would be a pick that they would have to fit their budget.
But if they went budget on Michelle, I don't know if they need to go budget on this player. That's what I'm trying to say.
Maybe, but like
Ansoonjae probably they didn't break the bank on their main
go
support.
budget on 2, right? Especially if it's like a 2-year plan.
They didn't break the budget on the main support. There's no way they paid a ton for Ansoonjae. As far as I can tell, not a lot of people had him super, super highly. So I assume that Michelle and Ansoonjae were probably more budget picks. I could be wrong, though. Maybe Michelle was highly sought after. Who knows?
Well, yeah, hey, maybe not. If so, then I'd like to go with Libero. But if it's a budget pick, then Valentine.
Yeah, I could see that. I think, listen, I think a lot of fans and a lot of people want Rascal. He's sort of, I think, the dream scenario. I think next, arguably more than Sado, he would be the biggest free agent signing. I think one of the issues with Rascal, especially if you're comparing it to somebody like Libero as well, and again, none of this is confirmed, but these are just the big names that's sort of available. I'm a little bit concerned if you look at, is Rascal going to be, like, everyone talks about, man, look how Rascal looked on the Shock versus Dallas. Dallas really messed up. How could you let him go? I think it was Dallas we played on, whatever, it doesn't matter, before Shock picked him up. But it could almost be looked the other way around. Like, this player obviously had some, like, inconsistencies at that point in his career, and did it take sort of the greatest coaching staff that Overwatch has ever seen to really bring the most out of him, right? Is he going to join a long list of players who looked really, really incredible on the Shock and then left the Shock and just didn't look as good as they were when they were on the Shock, right? Like, I don't think that can be overstated. Now, I'm not saying that's the case, because I think Rascal's incredibly talented. I know he has a history. He was talented when he came into the league. Like, he always had that upside. But is it possible that just the consistency was there because, like, the Shock were just so consistent and the coaching staff is so good? Like, do you run that risk where if you take him out of that environment, maybe he's not as good as he was when he played for the Shock? I think it's possible. I'm not saying it's the case. I just think it's possible. Whereas I look at somebody like Libero, and I think you know exactly what you're getting. He's incredibly consistent. He has one of the widest hero pools in the entire league. I still think he's a top, 5, top 6, top 7 flex sport in the entire league. He has a really good brand. I think a lot of people would still love him, and I think he's a more consistent pick. I think he's a safer option, and I actually think there's a possibility where maybe Rascal looks worse when he leaves the San Francisco Shock. You could argue maybe Libero looks better, right? Like, NYXL, the coaching staff.
Also, we don't want another situation like, obviously, no kind of bash on Nevix, but I think we're playing a little more safe when it comes to, like, thinking of people extremely highly if they're coming from the San Francisco Shock.
Yeah, but I'm not gonna.
That, like,
I don't want to put Nevix and we've seen Rascal look like an MVP. No. Nevix is on the bench, right? The two very different things. I know what you're kind of trying to say, but
no, I know. It just sounds like that's kind of what you're saying. Like, is it San Francisco Shock that makes them look good, which is what made Nevix look so good?
Yeah.
Or is it, he's actually good?
I think Rascal's actually good. I know what you mean, though. There's a potential where he doesn't look as good outside of the Shock. And I think Libero could actually look better outside of the environment that he was in NYXL. And I think if you pair, like, if you have Libero, Logix, and Heesu, you arguably cover every DPS in the league, right? And I think Valentine's a really good shout, too. Now, Valentine makes a lot of sense because he has a ton of potential. He's less established than guys like Libero, Rascal. He's probably cheaper. But again, you can grow with your core. He has history with Aztec. So I would say that those are the three most likely, just because they're available and they fit. Again, I would have loved to see Ivy, but we know that's not happening. So yeah, I think if we get one of those three, I'm really happy. And I think if you get one of those three, this is like a legitimate, like, Chris, if you get one of those three and you put them with the leaks / rumors that I've already established with this roster, where do you see that team?
I see that team definitely top 10.
NNA? Yeah.
Yeah, I see that top team.
I think you put it higher.
I'm seeing like high like 6, 7s.
I completely agree. I think
there's a lot of risk. I still associate it with the support line. I know we have some good things that people are saying. Still risk, though. So I'm not going to say like top 5, but I can definitely see between 5 and 10.
Yeah, because I think top 5 is pretty clear. I think you got your Shock, your Fusion, your Dallas, your Washington, and your Florida. And then I think you could put us with that, like, Houston Outlaw tier, like 6 and 7, right? Dark Horse potential. If things go right, we could really pop off. The Houston, Atlanta Reign, Toronto Defiant. Like, I think we're in that range with this roster, and that's like a really, really good place to be for a Defiant fan who's been at the bottom for the past 2 years. And are we going to win a championship next year? Probably not. But we've heard it multiple different times. It's a 2-year plan. Is it, hey, let's give these guys some time to develop, and then maybe we add 1 or 2 new pieces going into year 2? I think that's the way you play it. because I generally think that support line can be pretty good. The tank line can be pretty good. And although I do have concern about Michelle, if that's the only issue, right, then in the offseason next year, you just pick up an off tank. If Ansoonjae isn't the kind of guy you think he is, then there's a ton of like underage Korean main supports. Maybe you save some money and go pick him up again next year. It's a 2-year plan.
I'm sure he doesn't. I'm sure he isn't costing a lot. But at this point, yeah, I like the fact that it's a 2-year plan. I just want to like stick with roughly the same team for more than 1 year.
I think that's again that's the 2-year plan, and I think with this team you will. I don't see why, unless Sado just feeds his brains out, and hopefully not, knock on wood. But I'm sure Sado's 21. He could be your main tank for the next 2-3 years, right?
Yeah.
Heesu's going no. Heesu's like 19. Aztec's 20. Aztec's 20. Ansoonjae's 18.
Like at the same time, also Toronto Defiant need to be top 10 this year. We can't have another failing year. Like, I don't want to talk about what would happen if we were a bottom team again next year.
Yeah.
Like, I really don't, because.
And I don't think we will be.
Yeah, I don't think we will be either.
With the coaching and with the talent, again, we might not be top 5. But I think we could, like, on occasions, upset those teams. I think we can be a dark horse team. Would I be surprised if the meta hit us right and we beat the Florida Mayhem? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So if you're a Defiant fan, this is really good news. And again, it depends on the Flex DPS players. Maybe it comes out and I don't know, it's some fucking person I've never heard of. I think if you're, I don't know. Like, we've already heard so many rumors, and I'm trying to look at which teams need Flex DPS players, and it seems like those 3 are like legitimate chances.
Exactly.
I'm excited.
Well, we're gonna have to wait a while though. We're gonna have to wait a long time to see if they're actually good.
They're doing one release every 2 days. Come on.
Oh, come on. Hey, look, guys. Hey, thanks for listening today. Hope you guys like this good conversation. If you do like it, smash that like and subscribe button. We're coming out with new content every while. We have some more clips from our interview with Wool and some other stuff coming out. So stay tuned for that. So anything else you wanted to say?
I'm excited. I'm looking forward to this year. If you're a Defiant fan, this is the place to be. Your number one spot for Defiant analysis. We're going to be covering this all season 4. So I'm super excited. I'm super excited. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and as always, enjoy.